The storm roared like a beast, tearing through the desolate street where Maya, a homeless mother, shivered under a tattered shawl. Her fingers, numb from cold, clung to a faded photo of her daughter, her only spark in a world gone dark. Starving and broken, she mistook a glowing mansion for a shelter, its warmth pulling her like a lifeline. She pushed open the creaking door, heart racing, only to freeze. A lonely millionaire, his eyes hollow with years of solitude, stared back from a shadowed room. One wrong step, one fleeting glance. Could it save them both? Watch till the end to uncover their life-changing secret. Subscribe and share this story to spread hope. The rain clung to Maya like a second skin, seeping through her frayed coat as she stood trembling in the grand foyer. Her dark hair, matted and dripping, framed a face etched with exhaustion, her brown eyes hollow but fierce with a mother's unbroken will. At 32, life had stripped her bare, her job lost to a factory closure, her daughter Lila taken by social services 2 years ago after Maya couldn't afford rent. She slept in alleys, ate from dumpsters, and carried a crumpled photo of Lila's gap-toothed smile, the only thing keeping her heart from shattering completely. Tonight, the storm had driven her to seek refuge, and the glowing mansion, with its iron gates ajar, looked like the shelter she'd heard about on the street. Her mistake was innocent, born of desperation, but it led her here, standing on polished marble, water pooling at her feet, feeling like an intruder in a world she'd never known. Across the room, Edward Sterling froze, his hand tightening around a crystal glass of whiskey. At 56, he was a man who owned everything except peace. His silver hair was neatly combed, his tailored suit pristine, but his blue eyes carried the weight of a life spent chasing wealth and losing love. The mansion, a sprawling monument to his success, was a hollow shell echoing with the ghosts of a wife who left him and a son he barely knew. He'd built an empire in tech, but his heart was bankrupt, his nights filled with silence and regret. Edward hadn't expected company, not tonight, not ever. The shelter was miles away, and his home was no haven for strays. Yet here she was, this soaked, trembling woman, staring at him like a deer caught in headlights. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" Edward's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet hum of the chandelier above. His tone wasn't cruel, but it was guarded, laced with the suspicion of a man who'd been burned by trust before. He set the glass down, his movements deliberate, as if bracing for a threat. Maya flinched, her hands clutching the photo tighter, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought this was the shelter. The gates. They were open. I'm sorry, I'll go." But her legs wobbled and she swayed, hunger and cold sapping her strength. Edward's eyes narrowed, taking in her gaunt frame, the way her coat hung like a shroud. He didn't move to help, not yet, but something flickered in his gaze. Curiosity, or maybe recognition of a pain he knew too well. "Please, just let me stay until the rain stops," Maya pleaded, her voice cracking. She hated begging, hated the way it made her feel small, but pride was a luxury she'd lost long ago. Edward's jaw tightened. "This isn't a charity," he said, but his words lacked venom. He saw the photo in her hand, the way her thumb traced the edges, and it stirred something buried, a memory of his son's face, a photo he hadn't looked at in years. "You can't just walk into someone's home," he added, softer now but still firm. Maya's shoulders slumped, defeat settling in. "I know, I didn't know where else to go." The air between them was thick with tension, two strangers bound by their own loneliness, standing on opposite sides of an invisible wall. Maya's desperation clashed with Edward's distrust, their wounds laid bare in the silence. She was a mother fighting to survive. He was a man drowning in wealth but starved of meaning. Neither wanted this encounter, yet neither could look away. Could a mistaken step into a stranger's home bridge their broken worlds? Or would their defenses keep them apart? The storm outside howled louder, rattling the mansion's tall windows as Maya stood frozen in the foyer, her plea hanging in the air. Edward's gaze lingered on her, the crumpled photo in her trembling hands catching the dim light. Her fragility was undeniable, skin pale from hunger, eyes sunken but defiant, a mother clinging to hope in a world that had offered her none. He should have sent her back into the night. His life was ordered solitary safe. Yet something about her quiet desperation tugged at a thread he'd long buried. "Wait," he said, his voice low, almost reluctant. "You'll catch your death out there." He gestured toward a velvet armchair by the fireplace. "Sit, just until the rain stops." Maya hesitated, her instincts screaming to flee, to avoid owing anyone anything. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after years on the street where kindness often came with strings. But her body betrayed her, knees buckling as she sank into the chair, the warmth of the fire seeping into her bones. Edward disappeared into the shadows of the vast house, returning with a thick wool blanket and a steaming mug of tea. He set them down on the table beside her, careful to keep his distance like a man afraid of getting too close. "Drink," he said gruffly, avoiding her eyes. Maya's fingers wrapped around the mug, the heat stinging her chapped hands. She hadn't felt such simple comfort in years, and it brought a lump to her throat. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. Silence settled heavy, but not unkind. Edward leaned against the mantel, his eyes drifting to a dusty, ornate clock in the shelf. A relic from his past, its hands frozen at 12:07, the moment his wife walked out 15 years ago, taking their son with her. The clock was broken, like his family, like his heart. He hadn't noticed it in years, but now, with Maya here, its stillness felt louder, a symbol of time he couldn't reclaim. "That photo," he said suddenly, nodding toward the picture still clutched in her hand. "Your kid?" Maya stiffened, her guard snapping back up. She nodded, her thumb brushing over Lila's face. "My daughter, she's not with me anymore." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, shame and grief warring in her chest. She didn't elaborate, and Edward didn't push, but the air shifted, as if her pain had found an echo in his own. "I had a son," Edward said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He hadn't spoken of James in years, hadn't let himself feel the ache of his absence. Haven't seen him since he was 10. His mother, she didn't want this life. He gestured vaguely at the opulent room, its grandeur mocking his loneliness. Maya looked up, her eyes searching his face, seeing past the millionaire to the man carrying a wound as raw as hers. For a moment, they weren't strangers, just two people tethered by loss, sitting in the glow of a fire that felt like a fragile truce. "Why are you helping me?" Maya asked, her voice soft but edged with suspicion. Edward shrugged, staring at the frozen clock. "Maybe I'm tired of empty rooms." His honesty surprised him, and Maya's guarded expression softened, just a fraction. The blanket around her shoulders felt like more than warmth. It was a gesture, small but seismic, cracking the walls they'd both built. The storm outside raged on, but in this moment, the mansion didn't feel so hollow. Could this accidental meeting, this single act of kindness, be the start of something neither expected? The clock at 12:07 stood still, but time, for them, had just begun to move. The fire's glow softened the mansion's sterile grandeur, casting flickering shadows across the room where Maya sat, the blanket still draped over her shoulders. Edward stood by the mantel, his fingers tracing the edge of the broken clock, its hand stuck at 12:07, a silent witness to his fractured past. The storm outside had dulled to a steady drizzle, but neither moved to end the fragile truce they'd stumbled into. Maya sipped the tea, its warmth grounding her, and glanced at Edward. "This place, it's like a castle," she said, her voice tentative but curious. "Why live here alone?" Edward's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "It wasn't always empty," he said, then paused, as if the words cost him something. "Just ended up that way." He crossed the room, restless, and stopped at a cluttered sideboard. "You hungry?" he asked, almost as an afterthought. Maya's stomach growled before she could answer, betraying her pride. She nodded, and Edward motioned for her to follow him to the kitchen, a cavernous space of gleaming steel and untouched appliances, more like a showroom than a home. "I don't cook much," he admitted, pulling out a loaf of bread, some cheese, and a jar of jam. Maya hesitated, then took the knife he offered, slicing the bread with careful precision. They worked in silence, Edward spreading jam with the awkwardness of a man unaccustomed to simple tasks, Maya arranging cheese with a gentleness that spoke of nurturing someone long gone. The act was mundane, yet it felt like a ritual, a shared step towards something unspoken. As they sat at the counter with their makeshift meal, the kitchen began to feel less like a museum. The clink of plates, the soft scrape of a knife, filled the silence with a warmth the house hadn't known in years. "Lila loved jam sandwiches," Maya said suddenly, her eyes on the bread. She'd get it all over her face, laugh like it was the best thing in the world. Her voice wavered and she clutched the photo in her pocket, the edges worn from countless touches. Edward looked at her, his own memories stirring. "James used to steal my ties, wear them like a cape," he said, a faint chuckle escaping. "Thought he was a superhero. Haven't thought about that in too long." Their eyes met, a fleeting acknowledgement of pain they both understood. Parents separated from their children, carrying love with nowhere to put it. The conversation turned to the clock, its frozen hands a nagging presence. "It's been broken since, well, forever," Edward said, leading Maya back to the living room. He opened a drawer, revealing a tangle of tools and gears, remnants of a failed attempt to fix it. Never had the heart to try again. Maya, drawn to the challenge, picked up a small wrench, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. "I used to fix things," she said softly, "at the factory, before—" She trailed off, but Edward didn't press. Together they knelt by the clock, passing tools, loosening rusted screws. Their fingers brushed once, a fleeting contact that made them both pause, then continue as if nothing happened. The house, once a cold fortress, seemed to hum with their quiet collaboration, its walls absorbing their shared effort. "Why keep it?" Maya asked, nodding at the clock. Edward's hands stilled. It stopped when she left. Felt right to leave it that way. Maya nodded, understanding more than she said. "Lila's with a foster family," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saving to get her back. That's why I keep going." Edward looked at her, seeing not just a stranger, but a mirror of his own stubborn hope. The clock's gears clicked as they worked, a tentative promise of time, moving forward. Could this shared moment, this fragile bond, mend what their lives had broken? The living room was bathed in the soft glow of the fire, its warmth now a steady heartbeat in the once cold mansion. Maya and Edward knelt side by side, the broken clock between them, its gears spread out like pieces of their shattered lives. The storm outside had faded to a gentle patter, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of truth and reckoning. Maya's hands, steady despite her hunger, turned a tiny screw, her focus unwavering. Edward watched her, marveling at her quiet determination, so unlike the polished efficiency of his corporate world. The clock, stuck at 1207 for 15 years, seemed to hold its breath as if waiting for them to decide its fate and their own. "I lost her because I wasn't enough," Maya said suddenly, her voice raw, the wrench still in her hand. She didn't look at Edward, her eyes fixed on the clock's exposed heart. "Lila, they took her when I couldn't pay the bills. I failed her, but I can't stop trying to get her back." Her words cracked open a wound she'd carried in silence, each syllable heavy with guilt and love. Edward's chest tightened, her confession pulling at his own buried pain. He set down the gear he was holding, his voice low but steady. "I lost James because I chose work over him. His mother left and I didn't fight hard enough to keep him. I thought money could fix everything." He paused, his fingers brushing the clock's frozen hands. "It didn't fix a damn thing." The air grew thick, their shared grief hanging like a fragile thread between them. Maya's eyes met his, no longer guarded but searching, seeing the man behind the millionaire. She handed him a small gear, her fingers trembling not from cold, but from the weight of vulnerability. "We can fix this," she said, meaning more than the clock. Edward nodded, and together they worked, aligning gears, tightening springs, their movements synchronized like a quiet dance. The clock groaned, then clicked. A single, tentative tick that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Maya gasped, and Edward's breath caught. Another tick followed, then another, until the hands lurched forward, breaking free from 1207. Time, frozen for so long, began to move again. Edward laughed, a sound so rare it startled them both, a deep, unguarded burst that lit up his face, erasing years of solitude. Maya's lips curved into a smile, her first real one in months, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The clock's steady ticking filled the room, a symbol of their shared triumph, of wounds beginning to heal. Edward reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, tarnished pocket watch he'd carried for years, a gift from his son before everything fell apart. He pressed it into Maya's hand, closing her fingers around it. "This was James's," he said softly. "He said it was to remind me time matters. You've reminded me of that tonight." Maya's throat tightened as she opened the watch, finding an engraving inside. "To Dad, keep time for me." She looked up at Edward, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't have anything to give you." Edward shook his head, his eyes warm. "You gave me a reason to start again." He gestured to the clock, now alive, and to the room, no longer a mausoleum but a space breathing with possibility. Maya clutched the watch, its weight a promise of hope, of redemption, of a future where she might hold Lila again. Edward, for the first time in years, felt the stirrings of purpose, a spark to reconnect with his son. Their bond, forged in one accidental night, had rewritten their stories. The clock ticked on, a testament to their courage to face their pain and choose hope. Could this be the beginning of a new chapter for them both? Don't miss the resolution of Maya and Edward's journey. Subscribe and share this story to inspire someone to keep going. The mansion, once a hollow shell, now hummed with life, its grand rooms no longer silent. Weeks had passed since that stormy night, but the change it sparked in Maya and Edward lingered, like the steady ticking of the repaired clock on the mantel. Maya, no longer shivering in the streets, stood in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour as she kneaded dough for a loaf of bread. Her face, once gaunt, had gained a softness, her brown eyes brighter, though they still carried the ache for Lila. Edward had offered her a room in the mansion, not out of pity, but out of a quiet understanding that they were both rebuilding from ruins. She accepted cautiously at first, but now the space felt like a home, not just a shelter. Edward, too, had changed. His tailored suits were traded for sweaters, his silver hair slightly tousled as he moved through the house with purpose. He'd started calling James, tentative conversations that grew longer each week, rebuilding a bridge he thought was lost. The pocket watch Maya returned to him, insisting it belonged with him, sat in his pocket, a reminder of time reclaimed. Together they'd transformed the mansion's unused wing into a small community hub, a place for others like Maya to find warmth, food, and a chance to start over. Edward funded it, but Maya shaped it, her resilience guiding the way. They named it Lila's Light, a tribute to Maya's daughter and a beacon for those lost in the dark. On this crisp morning, the dining room buzzed with voices, neighbors, volunteers, and a few people who, like Maya once, had nowhere else to go. She served coffee, her smile steady as she listened to a young man talk about his job search. Edward, at the other end of the table, handed out flyers for a free computer skills workshop he'd started, teaching skills he'd once used to build his empire. "You're good at this," Maya said later, as they cleaned up side by side. Edward chuckled, a sound that came easier now. "Never thought I'd be a teacher. You're the one making this place feel alive." Maya blushed, shaking her head. "We're doing it together." The clock on the mantel, its hands now moving smoothly past 12:07, stood as a quiet sentinel of their journey. It wasn't just a repaired object, it was a symbol of their refusal to stay broken. Maya often touched it, her fingers tracing its carved edges, thinking of Lila. She'd started working part-time at a local library, saving every penny to prove she could provide a stable home. Edward, inspired by her fight, had hired a lawyer to help navigate the legal maze of reuniting her with Lila. "It's not charity," he'd said when she protested. "It's what's right." Maya hadn't argued, her gratitude unspoken but clear in the way she looked at him, a look that held trust, not suspicion. Their work rippled outward. The community hub drew people from across town, single mothers, veterans, teens with nowhere to go. Maya mentored a young girl who reminded her of Lila, teaching her to bake, her laughter filling the kitchen. Edward found purpose in guiding others, his once empty evenings now spent sharing stories and skills. The mansion's gates, once locked, stayed open, welcoming those who needed it most. Neighbors brought food, volunteers offered time, and the house, once a mausoleum, pulsed with music, chatter, and hope. One evening as the sun set, Maya and Edward stood by the clock, its steady ticks a backdrop to their quiet moment. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again," Maya said, her voice soft. "Like I belong somewhere." Edward nodded, his hand brushing the pocket watch. "You gave me a reason to open the doors, literally." They smiled, their bond no longer fragile but strong, built on shared pain and shared purpose. The clock ticked on, marking not just time but a new beginning. For them, for Lila, for everyone who walked through those gates. Sometimes a single moment, a wrong turn, a stranger's kindness can change everything. Maya and Edward's story reminds us that hope hides in the shadows of our darkest days, waiting for us to open a door we didn't expect. Their chance meeting, born of mistakes and shared pain, shows that healing begins when we let others in, when we choose to rebuild together. No one is too broken to start again, and no act of kindness is too small to matter. If this story warmed your heart or sparked a flicker of hope, share it with someone who needs it, a friend, a family member, anyone searching for light. Subscribe to catch more stories that remind us of our shared humanity, and let's keep spreading hope together. Picture that clock, ticking past 12:07, its steady rhythm, a promise. Every new second is a chance to begin again. Share this story today and inspire someone to believe in second chances.